Hey everyone, my name is Dustin,
I'm Damon.
and we are the design dudes coming at you from StudioSeviin. Today we're going to be talking about Overwatch. It's a game that Damon and I both have roots in. It's something we both play whenever we can with the limited free time that we do have. And yeah, Damon, why don't you go ahead and talk about what we're going to be talking about today?
We're going to be talking about 4 different heroes from Overwatch. Specifically about how we went from the start, like at launch, and then to where they are today, like through their design changes, their abilities, all that other kind of stuff. And we'll be talking about like why they got changed, what specifically was changed, and the impact they had on the community specifically, like casual play and competitive play.
Yeah, so to go off that, the heroes that we're going to be talking about today are Hanzo, Mercy, Torbjorn, and Symmetra. So, for those who don't know, Overwatch was released in 2016. I believe it was the springtime of 2016. And it was really a forerunner of a genre that we hadn't seen much before. It was a culmination of what Blizzard was best at, which is MOBAs and, just solid games in general. So they kind of combined the MOBA genre with the FPS genre.
And with that, like, they probably noticed that MOBAs were really big at the time, like League of Legends, seeing as how League also came from Dota, which was originally in their Warcraft game. And so they were like, oh, let's take MOBA abilities and champions, put it in an FPS, and soon they would have this giant, blown-up, amazing game called Overwatch.
Yeah, and of course with any Blizzard game, it was really hyped. They brought it to all their conventions, they showed it off. And it actually came from a failed game that they tried before that. They kind of salvaged some bits from it. All of which I don't think is necessary for what we're trying to talk about today, but just kind of gives you some backstory of the team and their dedication. It's something that they didn't give up on. They salvaged what they could in order to make a fantastic game with a big fan base. So without further ado, let's just jump into the characters and the changes that were made. We're going to start off with Hanzo, who is Overwatch's resident archer. As an archer, you would imagine he has to draw his arrow back and release it for additional range and damage output. His 2 core abilities at launch were Scattershot, which was an arrow that on impact it would shoot multiple arrows out from the one, and his Tracker Arrow, which sent out a radius, and anyone in the enemy team that was caught in that radius would be highlighted for Hanzo's team to see behind walls and just be highlighted in the open. Hanzo's abilities, mobility abilities, included a wall run. So he was able to run up to walls and just climb to get greater heights, and that definitely helped him get vantage points in order to shoot at other targets who might be further away. His ultimate at launch was Twin Dragons. So when he used his ultimate, 2 holographic dragons would spin in a circle in a straight line, dealing massive damage to any of the enemies who were caught in that damage radius. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Damon here, who's going to talk about the changes that were made to Hanzo in the more recent patches.
So today, Hanzo was changed significantly, causing his gameplay to be altered in a way where you will be more focused on shooting people from far away rather than aiming your scatter arrow at their feet and just one-shotting them. So with scatter arrow being gone, they replaced it with an ability called rapid shot or something like that. And what it would do is it would queue up 5 arrows that Hanzo could unleash like a barrage onto his enemies, like really quick.
And they kind of acted like fully charged arrows. So if you imagine having to draw your arrow all the way back, the rapid shot was more like 5 consecutive of those.
Yeah. His tracker arrow stayed the same, and his mobility changed slightly. Blizzard added a small dash when he was in the air. So anytime Hanzo was actually airborne, he could just make a short little hop forward, which would help him gain some mobility and help him escape like tricky situations where he might be getting stuck, pinned by someone or something. His ultimate stayed the same, so you still have the beautiful Twin Dragon effect, and currently that's all they've done to Hanzo, and he's still been the archer guy that he's been since release.
So the next hero that we're going to be talking about here is Mercy. For those who don't know, Mercy is one of the core healers in Overwatch. She's able to shoot a single beam that either heals a character or buffs a character, which increases their damage, as well as she has some minor abilities, like she's able to fly towards her teammates if they're in sight, and just small things like that. Her core abilities include... She doesn't have any abilities.
She can dash.
Like in the air?
No, just when she's looking at somebody, she can just
Yeah, she can fly towards her
fly
teammates.
towards her teammate, and that's really it.
Yeah, a lot of the changes that came to her were really about her ultimate, which used to be the resurrection. Pretty much what that would do is if a lot of your teammates died in one single area, say around an objective or a hard point or something, you can fly in and press the Q button to revive anyone within a radius. They kind of changed that as they found that she was being a little passive in her in the fights. So during core fights, for instance, she would let her teammates die because she knew she could just go and resurrect. So she would just hide while the rest of the team fought, and then once the team fell, she would come in and resurrect everyone. So Blizzard felt that was a little frustrating for the enemies playing against Mercies as well as the players, because really nobody likes to die even if they know that they're going to get resurrected. So they wanted to change it to something that's a little more aggro and something that's a little more Mercy's kind of style.
And they also really just wanted Mercy players to be in the fight and be like that healer who's active and cooperating rather than just sitting and waiting for everyone to disappear, so then she can just have her play the game and just show up.
Yeah, so one of the ways that they mitigated that was they actually made her resurrection into an ability of hers. So now it's a one-person ability with a large amount of cooldown time. So, for example, if Damon were to fall, I can just fly up to him and resurrect him, but I wouldn't be able to resurrect anyone else for at least 30 seconds.
About 20, 30 seconds, something like that, yeah. With the changes to Mercy's ultimate, now she's able to just go wherever she wants. When she activates her ultimate, it'll allow her to fly around freely, almost like Pharah, except way better because she has X, Y, and Z axis like moverability.
And it's important to mention that Pharah, she has like a fuel tank, so she can only fly for so long, whereas Mercy can fly for the whole duration of her ultimate.
Mercy's abilities and everything that she has is enhanced. So her gun has unlimited ammo, has increased fire rate, and the bullet projectile speed is increased, making her much better at combat than what she was without it. And her staff, her healing staff, basically what it does allows her to heal everyone around the target she's healing and also buff them up instead of just being able to just heal one person at a time. So it greatly enhances her ability to care for her team, and it makes sure that she stays up with them and is in the fight constantly.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that it's she can only heal or buff. She's not able to do both. Yeah. But it is true that if, say, Damon and I were standing right beside each other in game and there was a Murphy buffing Damon, I would automatically get buffed just because I'm close to him and she's in her ultimate.
Yep.
And yeah, that pretty much concludes the changes to Mercy. Yeah, they just kind of changed her to be a little more aggressive, I find, a little less.
Which I think was really needed.
Yeah.
Because Mercy, when she was at launch, she was good and everybody liked her, but as people got better at the game, Mercy started to fall off, and we saw more Lucios, more Annas, other supports basically, because Mercy just wasn't keeping up, and she was only used for those big, I'm going to resurrect my entire team plays.
Precisely. Alright, so the next hero that we're going to be talking about is Torbjorn. When Torbjorn first launched, he had a pretty predictable toolkit, but it was still fairly good. So what he could do is he could set down a turret. The turret would start off at level 1. He had a secondary weapon, which was just a hammer. After hitting the level 1 turret, after 5 or 10 hits with the hammer, it would be upgraded to level 2. The only difference that made was there are now 2 guns on it, so the rate of fire was faster and it had more health. Another mechanic that Torbjorn had was he was able to pick up scrap from dead allies and enemies, and once he had enough scrap, he was able to throw down armor pieces for his teammates to give them some extra health or extra armor, so to speak.
His ultimate was Molten Core, and what it did was basically like a giant stat buff for him and his turret. Molten Core would increase his health through armor, which basically, armor in Overwatch reduced the damage you took by 50%. It increased his fire rate with his guns, his damage, his reload speed. It upgraded his turret from level 2 to level 3, which basically added a missile rack on top of it.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, level 2 was already pretty good, but level 3 just really upped the damage output and its tracking abilities Yeah, so after they kind of changed him around a bit. Quoting the developers here, they felt that he was a little too feast or famine, especially when it came to his armor packs. He seemed like really niche. If you didn't have any armor packs, then you were kind of useless. If you did have a lot of armor packs, then you were almost too good.
Not only that with the armor packs, but also with his turret. Let's say he lost his turret, then he'd have to go and reposition it somewhere. And if he wanted to get in a good spot, he'd have to risk his life just putting down a level 1 turret, which then alone wasn't that good because it had to build up and get its health first. So people could just destroy it right away. Meaning Torbjorn had to go and change his position a lot and could be a useless member for a good minute or so while the enemy team just pushed your team in.
Yeah, especially with that leveling up mechanic of the turret. He would just kind of have to be dedicated to being around his turret so he could put the amount of hammers in that he needed in order to get it to from level 1 to level 2. So the way that the developers kind of fixed that is they kind of changed it so that now he launches his turret instead of placing it down. So if he wants to get it in a good position, no longer does he have to run to that position before putting it down. If it's in his eyesight, he can probably toss it up there with a well-timed jump and then throw. Once the turret lands, it gets built up at level 2. He still does have the hammer secondary weapon. However, instead of buffing it from level 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, all the hammer does in that mode is it just heals the turret. So if there's an enemy that's shooting at it, if you can hide behind some cover and still have that in your range, you can heal the turret as they try and take it out.
The turret takes, and also basically if you're feeling feisty and want to go melee Torbjorn, you can run up and just hit people with your hammer. Not recommended, but you can.
Yeah, I've honestly never seen anyone do that, and I can imagine why. He's already pretty short. He doesn't have a lot of reach, so getting in that range would probably be difficult for him.
Another change they did with Torbjorn is that they moved his Molten Core power-up to his E, basically. So it was just an on-use ability which he could have with the cooldown of 30 seconds. And what it would do is basically give him everything that Molten Core, his ultimate, gave him before, minus the turret upgrade. So he still got that increased armor. He still got that increased damage and speed and reload, which was great for Torbjorn because I think he needed it. But without that improved turret, you definitely, playing him, miss it because it was really fun being able to turn that turret into a killing machine.
Yeah, well, they kind of fixed that. Well, they didn't really fix it, but the way that they kind of changed that was his ultimate now is it's still called Molten Core, but the way it functions is a little different. So instead of getting a power-up where you can shoot faster, reload faster, build faster, etc., pretty much what you have is a lava gun. You can shoot lava onto the floor, and anyone who's standing in that lava takes 100 damage per second or something pretty crazy like that. And that just kind of reinforces Torbjorn's role as a choke point kind of holder, right? So you can potentially shoot your magma core down onto the floor and divert them into a narrow hallway where you have your turret down and it's just mowing them down. So they're kind of pinched in either option that they choose.
Yeah, Torbjorn, originally what they wanted was an aerial denial kind of guy, and he wasn't living up to that in vanilla base Overwatch, and I think what they did with him now really emphasizes that area denial controlled kind of character for defense, which is perfect for him.
Yeah, he was definitely one of more of a niche character before, and probably one of the characters who's seen one of the most amount of changes in his gameplay and his game style. And including that, they kind of scrapped the scrapping mechanic, so you can't give your teammates armor anymore. But they kind of fixed that by giving Torbjorn a lot of armor and just having a ridiculous damage output in his new ability. So the last character we're going to talk about today, and another character who's seen a lot of changes throughout Overwatch's lifespan, is Symmetra. So the way we're going to break this down is I'm going to talk about how Symmetra was at launch, what her toolkit was, how she played. Damon's going to go ahead and talk about how she was when she got changed back in 2017, and we'll both kind of talk about her more recent changes, which came out in 2018. So from 2016 to 2019, she's a totally different character from launch. So for example, her gun at the beginning, her normal left click, that used to lock on to characters.
Yeah.
and I believe it also used to get powered up the more it was locked on. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So not only did you have this really good character who was more close quarters combat, but the more she was shooting you, the more damage she was dealing over time. So she also had a shielding ability, which was able to target an ally, click on E, and that ally would be shielded, so they would take less damage. Or was it less damage or no damage?
Less damage.
Less damage.
No, it was no damage.
Because it wasn't
Basically,
a shield.
It was like an additional. It was a shield,
Mm.
but it was like very minimal. So it was like, hey, have 10 extra points on your health bar. So it wasn't that great, but she was able to just throw it out there like, oh hey, my entire team has 10 extra hit points per character, which I guess is an overall with 6 people. That's 60 extra health people have to go through in theory, but in gameplay wise, I don't think it was very good.
So she also had another ability where she was able to place turrets on walls. So how that worked is, I believe you would click on shift in order to enable the ability. You would walk up to a wall and you would left click in order to place that turret on the wall. Whoever was like in close proximity to that turret would get hit, and I believe it slowed their movement speed down as well.
Yep.
So it was really good putting like all 3 of them in a doorway. It made your opponent kind of look left, right, and up, and usually by the time they did that, a lot of their health was taken down, and because you knew that's where they were too, and their mobility was so lowered, you were able to kind of make it there and finish them off. And yeah, her ultimate at launch was a teleporter, and pretty much how that would function is you would just walk up wherever you wanted to place it, click Q to enable it. You would see an outline of where it would be placed, and as long as it's within the bounds of the level, you can place it there, and the other teleporter would be back at your spawn point. So anyone who died was able to just walk through this little doorway to, the center of the map, or maybe even right into the action.
Symmetra got changed. Not too big, but it was significant enough that it altered her gameplay in a small way. Her ally shield ability then soon became a energy wall projectile, basically like a moving shield that just launched forwards. And as good as that sounds, I don't think it was that great either, because later on they scrapped it.
Spoilers.
Spoilers. She gained some more turrets, so before she only had 3 turrets, now she has 6 turrets. And the biggest change with this update was that she gained a new ultimate on top of her current one that she could pick between the two. And the new ultimate that she got was a shield generator, which I personally thought was amazing. I loved it. And what the shield generator did was, as long as you were in vicinity of the shield generator, it would generate you shields up to like 100. So that was like 100 extra health you had on top. It was wonderful.
Now, if you lost that shield, but you were still in the range of the shield generator, would it re-up your shield?
It would regenerate your shield, and it would just keep
as long as you're in the radius, you just always had constant shield?
But I think the difference is that you had to not be in combat.
Okay.
So as long as you weren't fighting anybody, you could come back and get some more shield.
Yeah, so there's probably like a timer delay.
And also with the generator was that once you place it down, it just stayed there. I don't think it ever went away, so it was up to the enemy team to like get rid of it.
I feel like there was a timer on it.
You think so?
I think there was like a minute timer on it, but same with the teleporter. The teleporter, I think they went by number of uses, so it could only be used like 8 or 10 times, something along those lines. Or the enemy team can find it and destroy it. And the same is true with the shield regenerator. I don't think it was infinite, and I'm not sure if it was like...
I remember it being like there for a long time, though. I
definitely,
don't think it wasn't a minute. It had to be like at least 3, 4, 5 minutes, I swear.
Yeah, if you were on the enemy team, though, and there's a Symmetra on the other side, you definitely knew once she got her ultimate, that was something you wanted to find immediately and take it out.
Always a priority.
Yeah. So that kind of leads us to the more recent changes that happened to Symmetra back in 2018. So, for example, some of the biggest changes are like her gun doesn't lock on anymore. It still does deal that residual damage the longer it's hitting an opponent. So it will deal more damage the longer you're hitting an opponent, but it won't auto-aim for you. Yeah. It's up to you to be precise with that.
A much needed change, since before she could just run around, and this was only in casual play. I don't know how it was in competitive play, but in casual play, Symmetras would just hold mouse 1, walk around, jump, and just kill everybody. And a lot of play of the games like featured Symmetra's specifically just doing that, killing everybody by just walking around and jumping.
Yeah, it was a very strong option, and it still is if the Symmetra player is precise. But they kind of removed that, low barrier to entry where now you get to be more thoughtful and precise with your shots. To go off of that as well, they also nerfed her turrets. So she went from 3 at launch to 6 in 2017, and they brought her back down to 3 in the recent patch in 2018. I don't think that they ever end up changing any of the damage output values.
No, they did.
They did?
They did change the damage values, so now... Before, Symmetra was actually a support class, and from the way it sounds, that sounds right. But everybody was playing her as a damage class, and so Blizzard was like, you know what? That makes sense. Let's just put her in the damage class and change all of her stuff so it fits that role. So now her turrets can be launched, and when they do hit people, they have an increased slow than before, they deal more damage than before, and they're still easy to kill, but if you're, again, overwhelmed by like 3 of them in a doorway, you're gonna get screwed over.
Yeah, and it's important to note there that like she can shoot them now. So she doesn't have to walk up to a wall anymore and place them. So if you're defending one point, you can like send a turret to the other side of the arena that you're in. So it's not really dependent on you being positioned, kind of like that change to Torbjorn with his turret. Yeah. You don't have to be in the position in order to put your positioning in.
Another thing that they changed with Symmetra is that her teleporter ultimate is now placed on one of her basic abilities. But the difference between that is that she can teleport from her current location to another location. Same kind of theory where she puts down a pad and it just moves her team or whoever wants to enter the portal. But it's not as powerful as it was before.
Yeah, and something to go off, like quoting the developers, they found that Symmetra in her older forms, she wasn't being used as much as they wanted her to. They found that players were using her for her teleport ability early on in the games, so especially when you're on defense. However, they felt that players saw her as useless once that first checkpoint has been broken back. So if you've played on a map like Temple of Anubis, you spawn incredibly close to your second defense point, which makes a teleporter really moot at that point because you're really only teleporting 5 or 6 steps away, which is really only half of a second, which still may be enough to turn the tide of battle. But at that point, you're probably better off just switching to a different hero that has just better abilities and is better off at that.
More use in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. So the last final change that they made to Symmetra was her ultimate. So no longer can she choose between 2. She's gone back to only having 1 ultimate, and that's just one giant barrier. So she's able to place a barrier across the map. I'm not too sure on the intricacies of it, like if the enemies can destroy it or not.
I'm not sure either because I've never seen anyone destroy it. Mm-hmm. It's just... If you think just across the entire map, just one big wall, you can walk through it, but you can't shoot through it. So most people just walk through it. And it's mostly good for like blocking things like Torb's turret or somebody who's shooting a bunch at you and you just want them to stop.
Yep. Yeah, so that pretty much concludes the changes for Symmetra and kind of concludes all the heroes that we're going to be talking about today. We just wanted to kind of make note of how much they've changed, and we feel that these 4 heroes were the ones that were changed most drastically throughout Overwatch's lifespan.
There were a couple heroes that were changed, like at the start Bastion was changed, Reinhardt was changed a little bit, Roadhog was changed a little bit, Reaper was changed a little bit, but these 4 that we talked about were the biggest changes that we've seen in Overwatch over the years.
Yeah, like for example, like Bastion, the changes that happened to him is now him and Roadhog, they can both heal while walking, whereas before they used to have to be stationary to heal. So that's kind of a big change in terms of how they're played, because now you can kind of be defensive while healing. But it's definitely not as much as someone like Symmetra, who's had her toolkit completely changed and revamped.
Like 2 times, 3 times.
Exactly. So that's going to go ahead and end our first podcast here. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Thanks once again. We've been the Design Dudes, and Yeah, hope to see you next time.
Goodbye, friends.